Hey folks, it is April the 6th, and today we're going to talk a bit more about industrialization empire. We're also, if you remember last time, we ended up talking about some of the things that are going to start moving on to like a free market system. Alongside with the idea of capitalism, there's also going to be a push for things like workers' rights. And so we're going to see that develop as well. Because that's one of the criticisms of the pure free market system where there's no laws on business, is that sometimes the business owners don't really respect the people who work for them. And so we're going to see regulations come up regarding that. There's not going to be a video lecture tomorrow because you're supposed to be here taking your EOC. So, yeah. All right. So that means we won't meet again until, no. Thursday's the EOC. Wednesday, we will have a video. So we'll have a video tomorrow, just not on Thursday. My bad. All right, so you remember we were talking about nice things such as standardized goods. It's things with interchangeable parts. If something breaks, you can go to a catalog and order from the factory a replacement part. You can still do that today. Like, I think half the appliances in my house I've had to order replacement parts to fix. So, but that's good. That's good because if I tried to fashion a washing machine by hand, I wouldn't have clean clothes. Do it. Is this Monet? I think this is Monet, right? So this is like the Impressionist period of arts coming out. And the cool thing about Monet's paintings is he's capturing the rise of what we see of people who are called the middle class. These are people who have like spending income, right? Like they have income that they can actually go out in their free time and enjoy amenities, get better dressed clothes. And so you're going to see the growth as well of things like fairs and parks. More people are going to beaches, restaurants for sheer enjoyment, cafes. Hey, folks, we don't talk while I lecture, okay? So, all right. So, and so this is where we're starting to see popular entertainment, like theater for everyday people is starting to come back. So are things like music and stuff like that. So it's not just for the rich, but also some of the old peasant culture is like completely vanished now, right? So it's more of in some ways, a consumer culture. So the many cities face significant health problems, like we discussed last time. Remember, we talked about alcoholism, inhaling coal. People were smoking a lot. People didn't understand a lot of the medicines that were around could have poisonous materials in them like lead, or they could have super addictive things in them that could destroy your health as well, such as opium. And so they're not really sure how medicine works as well. It's going to be during this time period where you have the growth of what we call scientific medicine. But at first, scientific medicine is actually going to be more like hit or miss, more guesswork. And so you're actually going to see in some places the birth rate go down because of things like infant mortality rate's going to go up. So they're going to have places, I think this was in, I think it was in Vienna, Austria, where they're going to notice that the maternity ward where they deliver babies, the death rate for the babies skyrockets and they can't figure out why. And then they did an investigation and they found out that the same doctors who were doing embalming without washing their hands would go up and deliver a baby. And then you can imagine what would happen then. Right? So they were having to learn the hard way about things like hygiene and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So science is moving along painfully. So however, work hours were very long, greater than 12 hours a day. The wages were super low too, so people were making pennies. Of course, a penny could stretch further back then, but still. And work conditions were dangerous. Death and dismemberment commonplace. If you were harmed to where you could not work anymore, there was no insurance. You didn't get any benefits. You had to go beg or live off the family. If you died in the workplace, your family wouldn't get anything either. So this was a really rough world to live in. Tensions developed between the worker class and the upper middle classes. And so you can see that some people, they could see the vast inequalities of wealth, right? And education and stuff like that. So you're going to start seeing movements of people who are going to demand their rights, but also you're going to see some more radical movements as well. It's going to call for like the overthrow of the system in general and start questioning everything. And so it's like a throwback to the days of revolution. Children must often work in factories for the least amount of pay in dangerous conditions. And remember, we already saw that in England, they were trying to pass laws that would limit the working hours of kids. And soon they're going to start pushing for education. Of course, that's actually going to be led by the Germans. They're going to be the first to do this with public education, the way we think of it today. Now, places like England and, of course, America had education for children, but public education back then was more community-based. Your town got together and the town hired a teacher or two. They would build this little schoolhouse, and kids would go there at least long enough to learn how to read, write, and do math. And then they went back to the fields. But really, a full ride education was something more for people who had money, right? Or born into nobility. So, in some places, education, if you don't, like Japan, for example, in Japan, your mandatory education stops at middle school. If you're a really bad student, you're showing you're not really learning that well, they send you to a trade school to go learn how to do something like be a mechanic or something. But if you do really well, you get to go on to high school and then you get to go on to college. So it's more like a merit-based system. Some places like Europe today, like Italy, for example, you get to go at least, they instead of high school, they have something called academy. In the academy, you'll go for like, you might get your first 3 years of college done, but high school's longer. So you might not get a high school till you're like 20 or something. So it's like a mixture of high school and college put together. I mean, it's different throughout different parts of the world. So we would?
1 second.
Oh, 1,000. I remember, y'all don't write down all this stuff, right?
Okay.
Like, yeah, don't write all this. Just some of it. Like here's most important parts. Bad health, bad hours, bad money. People were mad. Kids had to work. And yeah, if you remember, I told you like a lot of times they put the kids in the most dangerous jobs. It's like, here, go squeeze into that machine and see if you can pull that bar out so we can get the machine running again. They pull it out, the machine runs, but it kind of pulls the kid through, and then the kid's not doing good. Yeah, I'd say that's not doing good. Yeah, that was pretty common though. I mean, it's tragic. Nobody wants that for a child, you know. I forgot who did this, but this painting is called The Strike. And so a strike is whenever you have workers all agree to not work. And if you're not working, the factory's not running. If the factory's not running, the owner's not making money. And if the owner's not making money, he's gonna have to do something or go broke. And so that was one of the bargaining chips that people are going to have early on in the factory system. And that's going to move on to other worker systems as well, right? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's going to be a big part of American history too when we talk about it next year. So, social change in the Industrial Revolution continued. In the early 19th century, workers' strikes and protests became more commonplace. Now, for example, see the Luddites? This is actually before the 19th. This is like an example. I think it's from like 1700s. The Luddites in England took to destroying textile machines. They believed robbed them of their jobs. So the Luddites were like this. Like there's not a lot that we know about them, but there was when in England you had weavers guilds. Remember back in the day they had guilds that would do things like make stuff. Well, the guild members started losing their jobs to machines that were doing it instead. You know the story of John Henry, the guy who could like swing a sledgehammer and make the train tracks and then compete with the machine. It was like that. It's like, yeah. Well, this is that story reflects this where people's jobs are being replaced by machinery. It still happens today. It still does, like robots and stuff. And I mean, shoot, when I go to Walmart, I got the line with the person, or I got the touchscreen. I go to the touchscreen. So, I mean, it happens, right?
When we go to the person, we have a lot of stuff.
Yeah. See, I mean, I get that. I get that. I mean, I only go to Walmart like 3 times a year, like, because I'm a hermit. I mean, I have a family, but I'm a hermit. So, I don't know. I hate shopping. Like, even if I need something, I hate going shopping. All right, so. All right, so the Luddites. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Bezos has been getting my money for like ever. Gosh. All right. So, yeah, back to this. So the Luddites, they started doing things where they were smashing these machines that were making cloth. Eventually, though, the King of England got pretty mad about this and sent the army after them, and they wound up hanging all their leaders. But their leader was known as, they called him King Lud. They're not sure who King Lud really was, but he wound up getting hung. So that's where they got the name Luddite. So if somebody calls you a Luddite, they're saying that you're backwards, you're against technology in a sense, right? So it can be used as an insult. So labor unions, which is different than a guild. See, it's like a guild is whenever you have a monopoly in an ancient system, right? A union is when you're just all workers and you join a group that's supposed to have insurance and bargaining power with the boss. These unions developed in England and the U.S. to fight for better working and housing conditions for the workers. The old guild system declines in the face of new industries. So yeah, I mean, you don't really need shoemakers, not as much. If your shoes are made by like the factory workers, you know, like they still are today by those poor kids in other countries, right? So, yeah, Liberty kids that I would like, and they say some of it is like literally like these kids are enslaving. That's your decision to make. It's hard to avoid these things though, because you don't know where stuff comes from. You don't know, right? I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, it's hard. You can like investigate where your products come from, but I don't even know if I trust what's on the internet. Yeah, that's excuse me. But yeah, I mean, times are changing. It's becoming less and less like the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and more like today in some ways. I mean, there's still unions around today in a lot of places. Like my wife's uncle and her brother are both in pipe fitters unions, where they do like for like plumbing and oil fields and stuff like that. Like there's still. I'm technically part of something that's kind of like a union for teachers, right? For like Christian educators. So, all right. Is that right? Hey, let's move on to the next one. All right. Wait, where was this? All right, so it's the French flag. And I think this is moving on to colonialism. Yeah, so remember, although industry is moving up and things are getting more modern, The big, powerful European countries were going out, and there's different reasons why they do this. Some of it was so that they could expand their wealth, have more places to sell their stuff, and also extract goods. And some of it was basically just for ego, nationalist ego. Hey, look at us, we own so much land. Some of it was ideological, like they thought they could spread their culture and actually improve people's lives. So, the reasons behind it, sort of true. This is kind of like the second part of this unit, and so we have some vocabulary terms. If you know what a term means, write it down. If you don't, you might want to talk a little bit of it. So, forms of colonial control vocabulary. So, colony, governed internally by a foreign power. That's a very shortened definition. So if you colonize a place, like in the ancient days of Greece, you literally got boatloads of your people and just found a new city somewhere else.
Let's colonize Germany.
Nah, there's people there. All right, so
Well, kind of like what we did with America and the great people we had.
oh, that's true. That's true. And see, yeah, so that's a lot like the Greek. Now the Greeks didn't just go necessarily where there weren't people, because there usually were some people there, and there would be some fighting. They said, "Oh man, no." And yeah, well, that's ancient. You can go back to any continent, anywhere in the world, and you're going to find examples of that, right? Like there are scores of archaeological finds here in America, North and South America, where one Indian group killed another Native American group that took their land. You can find that in Africa, you can find that in Asia, you can find that in Europe. It's a big part of human history. It really is. People go to other places, and they take it. Protectorate, country with its own internal government, but controlled by an outside power. All right, so we're going to get examples of this in American history. After the Spanish-American War, places like Guam and the Philippines and Cuba are going to become American protectorates. Let them have their own governments, but we still kind of told them what to do.
What if they're from states?
Huh? So what?
What if they're from states?
Hawaii kind of did that, but we kind of forced it on them. Man, that's a messy story. Let me think. Hawaii's the only one I can think of. Because like with the American processes, we had territory, and then we had under the territory we had like a process where you get so many people in the territory, they form a local government, they make a constitution that aligns with ours, then they petition Congress and we let them hold elections that become state, right? So it's a little different. Sphere of influence. Area claimed by an outside power for exclusive investment and trading. So it'd be like this. It'd be like, hey, we're the British Navy, and we see that around the ocean of India, you've got all these little small island countries. Well, we're going to be the only ones who get to trade with them. No one else can come in. Or you're going to see that with Japan and the Dutch. Like the Japanese are going to be like, we're only going to trade with the Dutch. If anybody else comes here, we're going to kill you. So it's going to be like that for a very long time. Economic imperialism. Independent countries controlled by private interests. So yeah, we saw this with Hawaii. Hawaii had a native kingdom led by a queen. However, a private fruit company that ran banana plantations and stuff like that actually controlled the government, told the queen what to do.
Hold on, a fruit company controlled the government?
Yeah, the Dole Fruit Company. And then one day they got kind of tired. The queen actually tried to declare independence from them, and so they had some guys kind of kidnap her, and then they pressed her statement after that. It was kind of messy. And then Hawaii became the state.
Wait, it's all fruit.
Yeah, they took over.
The Dole fruit.
Yeah, they took over a chain of islands called Hawaii. Yeah, so Yeah. I gotta admit, I eat bananas almost every day. So
So what?
bananas are like a modern miracle when you think about it, because they don't have that long of a shelf life. But most of them come all the way from South America. They gotta chop them, put them on the boats, bring them here, make it down the trucks to your grocery store. Then you gotta get it to your house all before it rots. That's pretty miraculous. It's pretty neat. That's a side note. So. Yeah, I can't imagine life without bananas. I remember, it was like 7 or 8 years ago. There was like this disease that was going around all these banana plants, and they literally thought it was going to be the extinction of bananas. And I was like, I was almost panicking. I was like, what? I didn't know how my kids would live without bananas. I'd be like, how are my children going to grow up without bananas? You know, it was like crazy. So, anyways, they're still around today. I guess it was a big nothing. A lot of panics are usually nothing. So, all right, you ready to move on? All right, let's see. Let's check 21 minutes. Okay. This is a sugarcane plantation. But man, I don't know where it's at.
Probably in Kenya. I don't know why.
What? Kenya? Does those look like Kenyans, dude?
I don't know what Kenya looks like.
Yeah, East African. It's a East African country. It's mostly Christian, if I remember right. It's one of the few. All right, so they do. Well, no, they're like split. I think mostly Christian. Yeah. So patterns of imperial management. So this is more vocab terms. So the reason I put this up here, I know it's kind of long, but it's because this is what defines the world we're in today. So many of the countries that are around today were the products of empire from this period. It's going to be this mode of empire that's going to pave the way for most of the world to adopt patterns of European culture and American culture, such as wearing blue jeans, listening to, I don't know, what do you kids listen to today? Michael Jackson. Like eating Taco Bell. There's like a Taco Bell in every country now, you know, like, that's a big deal. No, I'm just saying, you know, it's just a sign. We share things, heck. There is. Yeah, there's McDonald's in like every country, except maybe South Korea, where they eat grass. Okay, Google it. There's pictures of people harvesting grass to eat in South Korea. It's sad. It's like super sad. And all that'll do is fill you up to the percent when you're starving. Like you can't digest grass. It's mostly cellulose. Cows have to have 3 stomachs and a complete different set of enzymes just to digest grass. And we only have one. We don't have those enzymes.
We only have one of those.
All right, so patterns of imperial management. Indirect control. So here's one style of having an empire. Local governments, officials with limited self-rule. Laws based on European styles and local rules. So this is how usually the British would have an empire. They'd be like, okay, we're going to let you run things you want to, but even though the locals are going to kind of be in charge, you have to have laws that we like, and we're going to set up our own education system, things like that. An example would be the 13 colonies in North America before the Revolution, were mostly British. We had to bless the crown, and our laws had to kind of like align with their laws and things like that, as we'll see next year. But you're pretty much left alone. Then here's the one that's more of a French style, direct control. Exclusive use of foreign officials with no self-rules. So the French would send their own people to go be your governor and to tell you what to do. Laws based only on European laws. Policies of civilization to absorb local cultures and European culture. So like in large parts of Africa, they speak French because whenever the French would have colonies there, they would make the kids there go to school and learn French. Their laws had to be French laws. Their culture, they tried to make them French as much as possible. So that's why there's parts of North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa where a lot of people speak French. If you know French, you can get through a lot of Africa and a lot of people understand what you're An example there. Yeah, I just said that. Okay, so, the thing though is that this is pretty oppressive, and it's actually going to lead to a lot of violent uprisings against the French, as we'll see later on in the 20th century. So you're going to have a lot of people who are like, well, we want our own autonomy, want to be our own country, not you telling us what to do, because it's really insulting to have like somebody who has like from outside of your culture and your country telling you how to live your life. That would be pretty insulting. I think we'll do two more like that. Now, yeah, the British were really weird how they would do this. They're British smart. Like in India, they set up a king who was part of the minority group there. And so the only way the king could stay in power against the majority was if the British kept him in power with their army. They're going to do the same thing in Iraq. They're going to take over Iraq and install a king, a guy called King Faisal. And he's going to do everything the British tell him because he knows the only way he got the crown and keep it is if he has the British army there. So it's going to look like the locals are ruling it, but really it's a puppet prince. He's only there because somebody with guns is keeping him there. So, but it's going to be super expensive. Empires are really expensive. I think this is from the Zulu Wars. Yeah, so like this is when the Zulus were like very fierce warriors, right? They figured out that if they run in waves and if they don't care if they die, they can actually overrun modern troops. And so the British had a very hard time fighting Zulu warriors while they were trying to push on imperialism in Africa, right? So imperialism impact. So imperialism, having colonies and controlling our other parts of the world is going to leave lasting marks, as I said earlier. So one of these things is native people lose control of their lands and their independence. That's true. If you're conquered by a foreign people, you're not independent. So new diseases such as smallpox reduce native populations. We saw this in America. Remember Native Americans? They had been completely cut off from the other hemisphere, from the eastern hemisphere, for thousands of years. And then all of a sudden, these new diseases come and hit you when you have no immune system and it wipes out over half of them. Resistance movements develop. We already saw this in China. Famines. And we see this in America too. You're going to see it in North America, even 13 colonies, who were like culturally, linguistically, and genetically British. Well, they're still going to have resistance movements. Famines from shifts from subsistence, cash crop farming. You're going to see this in places like Somalia and Haiti and places like that, where they overfarm. And the local people are going to forget their old ways of making food. And so whenever they can't revert back to those things, it's actually going to affect certain Native American tribes too, like the Caddo here in East Texas. They have grown so dependent on imported goods from French people that when they got cut off from that, they didn't even remember how to make pots and stuff like that. Like, oh gosh, what are we going to do? So they forgot the old ways. Like, I mean, can you imagine if you had to all of a sudden live without gasoline and electricity tomorrow? It'd be pretty rough. Yeah, see, that'd be really hard. They would hallucinate. Yeah. All right, well, your life will be short. All right. And harsh working conditions reduce native populations. Yeah, a lot of these people were enslaved or impressed and worked very hard. It was very bad. You have identity crisis develop in colonies regarding race as well. So remember, this is a big period of where we think of like the height of racism, right? And in certain places, like India is a good example. You're going to have people from India grow up their whole life only knowing how to speak English. They're going to go to English schools. They're going to get, they're going to move up through English society as lawyers, doctors, and things like that in India. But because they're ethnically Indian, they're not able to get into good positions or get good paid jobs or even get respected by British citizens because of their race. So you're going to see that this is going to help places like India decide we need to have independence because we're obviously not getting along with the others, so we should maybe be our own people. So I guess we're going to cut it off with that one. Been a good 30 minutes. All right, folks. So yes, we are going to have a lecture tomorrow. But Thursday is EOC day, and see you later.